Good evening, class. This is Mrs. Albright, and tonight we are working on Module 5, Lesson 30, and our objective this evening is to learn how to add a mixed number and a fraction. So get your scratch paper or whiteboard so you can work right along with me, and let's get started. So the first problem that we have here to add is 2 3/8 plus 3/8. And before we can start adding these fractions, I want to think about what these numbers are in terms of their units. So this mixed number, 2 3/8, I want to decompose that into its different units. So I have 2 1s and I have 3/8. And that way I'm breaking this up. Now I can then include this additional 3/8 with my new number sentence. So now I have rewritten my number sentence as 2 plus 3/8 plus 3/8. When we are adding, we can only add like units together. So I can't add my 1s to my fractions, but because these are both 8ths, I can add these together. So 3/8 plus 3/8 is 6/8. And now I can add those two whole to the fraction. So I end up with a total of 2 6/8. If we were to draw this out as tape diagrams, I would start with 3 bars because I want to model my first mixed number, the 2 3/8. I'm going to break this third one up into eighths. And for the 2 3/8, I would color in 2 whole bars and 3/8 of this next one. Now when I'm adding to that, I'm not adding a whole unit. I'm only adding part of a unit, which is 3/8, so I can color in 3 more. And when I add those up, I would see that that does match this fraction where I have 2 wholes and then 6/8 left in this additional whole. I can also solve this problem on a number line. And if I start here with 1 or 0, 1 whole, 2 whole, 3 whole, I need to start when I'm adding at 2 3/8. So I'm going to break this part of the number line into eighths between 2 and 3, and I'm going to find 2 3/8 on the number line, which is right there. And then I'm going to ask myself, what am I adding to this? And I'm adding 3/8. So I'm going to hop 1, 2, 3 places on the number line, and then determine what is the name of that new point on the number line, which is 2 6/8. So that's just another way of visually looking at it to see how we can add these two fractions together. Now I would like you to try adding these two, 2 3/9 plus 4/9. Hopefully after you added these up, you added up your ninths to get 7/9. And then you included the 2 whole for a total of 2 7/9. Sometimes when we are adding, we want to think about how many more units would it take to get to the next whole. So in this example, if I start with 3 1/8 and I want to get to 4 whole, I need to ask myself how many more eighths, if I were on a number line, and here's 3, here's 4, and I'm breaking it into 8 equal parts. And if I'm starting at 3 1/8, how many more eighths does it take to a whole? Well, to get to the next whole. Well, I know that 8/8 is equal to 1 whole. So if I already have 1, it would take 7 more to get to that next whole. So 3 1/8 plus 7/8 would equal 4 whole, because this 1/8 and 7/8 together is 8/8. Plus that 3 plus 8/8 or 1 whole equals 4. I'd like you to try that strategy, 5 1/7 plus what would get you to the next whole, which is 6. Hopefully after figuring that out, you would have gotten that 5 plus 1/7 plus 6/7 would get you to 6 whole, because that 1/7 and 6/7 would equal 7/7, our 1 whole. We could add that together with the 5 we already had to get our 6 total. In this problem, we're going to see what happens when we add a fraction and a mixed number, and the fractional part ends up being greater than 1. So if we were to add these together, 2/4 plus 3/4 is 5/4, which is greater than 1. So I can't leave my fraction as 5 and 5/4. I want to keep this decomposed, so it's 5 plus 5/4. And then I can decompose this 5/4 even further to pull out that 1 whole, the 4/4, and 1/4. And now I can add that 1 whole to the 5, which actually makes this total 6 and 1/4. If we were to look at this on a number line, starting with 5, and I am going to include 7 on my number line, I'm going to break it up into fourths. And if I'm starting at 5 2/4, which is also 5 1/2, and I'm adding 3/4 to that, when I hop on the number line, 1, 2, 3, you can see I go past the 6 whole, so that's why it ends up being 6 and 1/4. I would like you to try this one on your own, 7 2/5 plus 4/5. So make sure you add up the like units and convert that fractional part into another mixed number if you need to, because this fractional part will end up being more than 1 whole. Hopefully, after you solved this problem, you rewrote it as 7 plus 2/5 plus 4/5. When we add these together, we get 6/5, which can be decomposed as 1 whole and 1/5. And then we can add that 7 to it. So it's 7 plus 1 plus 1/5 to give us a total of 8 and 1/5. If you did not get the right answer, go back and watch the video again so that you can review some more. This problem gets a little bit more challenging because we have 2 mixed numbers. So again, when we are adding, you really want to think about adding up like units. So I'm going to decompose both of these mixed numbers. So we have our units separated. I have my 3 1s, and then my 5/12, my 1 whole, plus my 11/12. So I want to add my like units. I'm going to add my 12ths to my 12ths. So I end up with 16/12. And I'm going to add my 1s with my 1s. So I end up with 4 1s. So now I have the number sentence 4 plus 16/12. Well, when I look at 16/12, I see that that is still an improper fraction. So I want to decompose that even further to 12/12, or 1 whole, and then 4/12. So now I can combine that 12/12 with the 4 whole, because now that 12/12 is 1 unit, to make a total of 5 whole and 4/12 left over. Now to go even further, we would want to simplify that and reduce that 4/12 to 1/3, make it a simpler fraction, and write it in its lowest terms. Before we get to the final quiz, I want to give you a chance to do 2 more practice problems, 3 7/8 plus 3/8, and then 9 11/12 plus 5/12. Hopefully after completing those, you got 4 2/8, or you could simplify that to 4 1/4, and then 10 4/12, which could also be reduced to 10 1/3. If the fraction that you got to, if you did not put it in lowest terms, that's okay. I would still accept those as your answers. If you did not get them correct, go back, watch the video, practice some more before you take the final quiz. Here are your final quiz questions: 4 1/3 plus 1/3, 2 2/3 plus 2/3, 7/10 plus 6/10, 8 9/10 plus 5/10. Please do your best. Bring any questions you have back to class, where we will continue working on this, and I will see you tomorrow morning. Have a great night.